Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on the weekend of November the 18th and 19th, 2023. Gavin Newsom, the Governor of California, has been in the news recently because he's being seen as a possible replacement for Joe Biden. As we can see, Joe Biden is getting a lot of criticism. There's a suggestion that he's not up to the job. I think Joe Biden himself has sort of musing about a potential replacement, I think, as I understand it, mentioning Gavin Newsom. So people are thinking that maybe Gavin Newsom could be the Democrat candidate next year, or somehow could take Biden's place. So, of course, you've still got the issue of Kamala Harris. Is she just going to go away? I don't know. I haven't been following too hard what's going on with her. Now, I have looked at Gavin Newsom's horoscope fairly recently. I think I looked at it maybe in July, end of July. So I think it's time to have another look at his chart. Now, he does have, in many respects, quite a good chart. His Vedic chart is quite good. He's certainly, there's certainly a lot of reason to be optimistic about Gavin Newsom. I've just had another look at his chart, and I'm thinking that a lot of astrologers are going to be thinking that, I think a lot of astrologers are going to be optimistic about Gavin Newsom. There's one particular thing going on in Gavin Newsom's horoscope that people are going to be excited about. And it's the kind of chart where a beginner astrologer might be particularly optimistic about Gavin Newsom's prospects for becoming for getting elected president at the end of next year. So I'm not disparaging beginner astrologers because very often in astrology the very obvious signatures, which perhaps when you've become a bit more jaded some decades later you discount, sometimes the very obvious signatures actually work. So who knows? This might be a case where people who've just started learning astrology, started learning about transits, get it right. Who knows? But I will be considering this issue, and I will be giving my opinion about whether or not Gavin Newsom is going to become president anytime soon. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology for the weekend of November the 18th and the 19th, 2023. Now, if you've been listening to me over the last month or so, you would know that I have been but really, I've been very negative about November. I believe I'm not the only astrologer who's been negative about it. November, you can't miss the fact you had this Mars-Uranus opposition. You can't miss the fact that you've had that really difficult new moon on November the 13th. So we can't do anything. We can't do anything about that. And November has looked rather grim. But the end of November, as we move into the last half of November, this kind of thing does start breaking up. So maybe as we move towards the end of the month, some of the pressure is going to start to ease. Now, as far as this weekend is concerned, we have a Sun-Mars conjunction. We had a Sun-Mars conjunction yesterday, but this Sun-Mars conjunction in Scorpio is really here. This is it. From now on, the conjunction starts to break up, and that's probably good news. So some of the stress of the Sun Mars is certainly going to ease. But still, we have to remember that the Sun and Mars are in conjunction this weekend. The Sun and Mars, two male planets, two very positive planets, two planets that can be quite aggressive. Mars is in Scorpio, very strong Mars, but it's combust. Mars is kind of weakened by being conjunct the Sun, but that doesn't weaken, not in the sense of being less powerful, in the sense of, sorry, that doesn't sound right. It not weakened in the sense of not being able to cause damage. So this weekend, we just have to be careful. We must not be headstrong. We have to accept that times are still very tumultuous, and there's plenty of scope for having accidents and mishaps. So really, don't do anything dangerous. Don't play around with machinery. As I said yesterday, fire, electricity, that kind of thing. You have to be really careful with it. I suppose with Sun Mars conjunction in Scorpio, electricity and water you need to be very careful about. And in dealing with other people, there's still plenty of scope for arguments, for people being really, really stubborn, sticking to their view, even when their view is completely self-destructive. Mars in Scorpio can be destructive, self-destructive. It will hold on to something that's a matter of principle, regardless of how painful it is, regardless of how much damage it causes. So be aware of that. Now, at 11:27 a.m. on Saturday, London time. Now, this chart here is of course set for New York. But as far as London is concerned, 11:27 a.m. on Saturday, the moon moves into Aquarius. Now, if you're in the Americas, 11:27 a.m. is 6:27 a.m. New York time, 3:27 a.m. Los Angeles time. So if you're in the Americas, the moon goes into Aquarius early in the morning, so you can really, on Saturday. So if you're in the Americas, really, the moon is in Aquarius all weekend. If you're in Western Europe, moon is in Aquarius for most of the weekend, from certainly lunchtime on Saturday onwards. If you're sort of in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, moon doesn't go into Aquarius until late on Saturday. The evening. So really, for those of you in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, East Asia, New Zealand, Australia, then most of Saturday the moon is going to be at the end of Capricorn. So there's going to be a slight difference depending on where you are. So with the moon moving from Capricorn into Aquarius, that's like Capricorn is an earth sign. It's moon in Capricorn can be quite selfish, can be quite focused on itself, particularly when it comes to money. There's a certain meanness about moon in Capricorn. So moon going into Aquarius breaks that up. We don't have that extreme obsession with materialism that we had with moon in Capricorn. And moon in Aquarius can be more detached, more open-minded. Moon in Aquarius is traditionally not particularly emotional. It's not emotional like moon in Scorpio or moon in Cancer. It can be objective. And moon in Aquarius is good because it makes a trine aspect to Venus. So Venus is about relating to other people. Relationships can work well, not on a particularly emotional level, but more on a sort of verbal level, finding common interests, that kind of thing. Though I should say that the moon does make a square aspect to Jupiter just before it makes a trine to Venus. So, moon in Aquarius has its benefits, but it is quite inflexible. And so moon square Jupiter, there can be, some inflexibility about ideas. And that sort of links with Sun-Mars conjunction. The Sun-Mars conjunction is about sticking to one's principles. And then you've got the moon in a fixed sign, square Jupiter in a fixed sign. And Jupiter is also about principles and ideas. So I think overall this weekend, people are going to stick to their guns when it comes to ideas. I mean, it's possibly not a good idea to have an argument about, I don't know, the Middle East. Your friendships. I know friendships have broken up because of arguments about what's happening in Gaza. But it's that kind of thing. Everything's fine, everyone's having a good time, and then you have an argument about Gaza, and everything, the whole thing collapses, or some other political issue. So if you're bringing up matters of principle and politics, even history, be careful, because something like that, which of course it is very important, what's going on in Gaza. I understand people have strong opinions both ways about Israel and Hamas and so forth, but if you are going to get into, if you are going to mention controversial subjects, think carefully about what you're doing. Is this really what you want to do? So there's a bit of a warning there, but I think if we just avoid controversial subjects, then that should be okay. One final thing is that the moon is making a sextile to Mercury as well. So as the weekend progresses, probably we're going to get sort of a bit less of that stubbornness, a bit less of that obsession with principles. Moon sextile Mercury is a kind of a free flow of information, where maybe people can disagree without resorting to nuclear war. So that's the weekend. Still, the main feature is that Sun-Mars conjunction. It hasn't gone away. It's a much stronger influence in, for example, moon trine Venus. So be careful. Be careful on a physical level. If you don't do anything dangerous, stupid, and try to avoid controversy unless it's really important. Okay, so now I want to move to my forecasts for the 12 signs. So here we go. These are my forecasts for the weekend of November the 18th and 19th, 2023. Aries. It's difficult to see the whole picture. Your eyes and your senses can physically perceive it, but your feelings are blocking things. You have a subjective view about the way things should be, and there's a temptation to hold onto it in contradiction to reality. But if you do some socializing and perhaps go to a party, you'll have a chance to appreciate other viewpoints. Taurus. Some of the people around you are behaving like malfunctioning robots. They can't think straight, and they're giving lots of error messages. But really, it shouldn't bother you. You've got your own things to do, and with the moon in Aquarius making a favourable aspect to Venus, you can quietly move ahead with your own agenda. Ambition is nothing to be ashamed of. Gemini. So many ways of looking at the world, and so many people with strong opinions. It's a time to listen but not to linger. Get the gist of what's being said and then move on, because the last thing you want to do is get sucked in to someone else's craziness. Yet engaging with interesting, controversial individuals is a fun thing for Geminis to do. Cancer. You're feeling cautious. The world seems complicated and you're not convinced that other people can be trusted. And I think you can actually verbalize your concerns. They're not just vague feelings. There's no need to apologize. You know where you feel comfortable, and this knowledge can guide your decisions over the course of the weekend. Leo, there's a lot you're keeping to yourself. Perhaps because you just can't be bothered to explain things in detail. Yet you do have to interact with other people. Not just because it's expected of you, but because you can benefit from the experience. And if you're open about the real you, just a bit, you could be amply rewarded. Virgo. It's an okay weekend, but probably nothing to write home about. You'll do what you need to do and you'll be able to communicate pretty effectively. But you're not really in the mood for surprises, particularly if they involve last-minute changes of schedule. You'll be good at explaining to people how you want things done. Libra. You don't have to follow the crowd, and by being an individual, you're not necessarily cutting yourself off from the rest of humanity. Indeed, you can be the one that everyone follows, and your priority is to you yourself. Doing what you enjoy and putting personal creativity ahead of everything else. That way, you'll be the kind of person that everyone looks up to. Scorpio. You're very concentrated on yourself this weekend, and as a result, you may be missing out on options to do things differently. Also, this concentration might be disruptive of your home and family life. So step back a little and ask yourself what's really important. But despite everything, it can be a very productive weekend. Sagittarius. You find yourself doing things almost for no reason. Or rather, you might forget why you started in the first place. It's certainly easy to get involved in something and then to go through the motions. But there comes a point where you need to stop what you're doing and consider a change of course. Capricorn. Over the weekend, a fair amount can be accomplished, especially in terms of money, career and business. So just because other people are relaxing doesn't mean you have to join them. Yet, with the moon aspecting Venus, it's nothing stressful, and there'll be an atmosphere of connection and general understanding. Aquarius. The moon is moving through your star sign, making a brilliant aspect to Venus. It should be a good weekend when you can enjoy yourself in many different ways, and your various relationships could be extremely rewarding. But if a relationship is very close, there could be tension. Perhaps the other person is annoyed about something. Pisces. There's a lot going on this weekend, but much of it is under the surface. No one knows what is really going on, and there could be a fair amount of speculation. For your part, you don't want to give anything away, because if things are hidden and are not being discussed, there's a lot more freedom. So that's those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. So what I want to do now is look at the I Ching. As always, I asked a question. The question being, what will this weekend be like for people watching this video? So I threw 3 coins 6 times, and I got the following hexagram. Hexagram 57, the gentle. You can see that this hexagram has got 2 repeated trigrams, these 3 lines. You've got the bottom 3 lines and the top 3 lines are the same, the wind. So the gentle is about getting into things. It's about understanding things. It's like the wind moving through, a house, getting into every nook and cranny and getting to the bottom of things which maybe are bad, understanding the evil in the system. I mean, I use the word evil, I suppose, quite a lot when talking about the I Ching. It's just, I mean, it's perhaps a bit of an exaggeration to talk about evil, but the things that are wrong. And so the wind can really understand what is going on, understand what is wrong. Though I should say that Greg Winkup, in his translation of the I Ching that was published in the 1980s, he kind of relates to this hexagram to submission. Submission meaning, submission to a higher authority. And I suppose that links with the gentle. We know it's not a time for us taking big initiatives. We have to sort of try to understand what's going on. And yeah, in certain instances, it may be accepting a higher authority, because it will just make it more productive. So who would a higher authority be? Well, it's not literally going to be the government, but it just may be that in our social interactions we don't always have to be the one taking the initiative. We don't always have to be the one in control. We can perhaps let other people take the initiative. However, there is a moving line here. This third line moves, and this third line is a bit of a problem. When you have a moving line, the third in the third place, third from the bottom in the I Ching, that's often quite unfortunate. And the problem here is that we make a great effort to understand what's going on. We really deliberate. We really need to know what's going on, and we spend so long working out what's wrong, what needs to be done, that we miss the moment. In other words, too much time thinking, we miss our moment and we lose it, and that's a problem. So we can't spend too long thinking. We can't spend, we can't just spend forever gathering information about a situation. At a certain point, we have to say, okay, enough is enough. We understand what's going on. We now have to take action. And this hexagram, the gentle, moves to hexagram 59, dispersion, which I think we've had quite recently. This is about water, it's about rain, it's about the floods, it's about things being cleared away. So this might be, if we look at the two hexagrams together, certainly with 57, we understand what is wrong. We understand what needs to be done. We understand what's holding us back. Well, we can't spend too long trying to understand what's holding us back. And then it's time to clear everything out. The floods come. This can be quite a disorienting thing. When I was talking about dispersion a few days ago, I kind of compared it to being in a washing machine. Everything is thrown everywhere, and this is just like cleaning. I mean, I suppose you could see it like a power washer, just everything being removed, really getting right into the, all that dirt needs heavy pressure water to get rid of it. And so there's a lot of garbage in our life where that heavy pressure is required, and it all goes, and we understand what's wrong. And so this weekend then could be about just cleaning everything out. And it's in terms of the astrology that I've just been talking about, the Sun-Mars conjunction that has been getting stronger and stronger and stronger has now reached its peak. And, the issues with Scorpio, that Mars-Uranus opposition, all that stuff in Scorpio that's been building up, getting really stuck, causing a lot of problems around the world, finally getting better. And so dispersion may kind of be linked with that, although I must emphasize astrology and I Ching, they are separate, they are independent. So now it really is a time to clear the decks, maybe with a power washer. Okay, so that's I Ching, and I now want to talk about Gavin Newsom. So I did talk about his chart, I think in July. So I'm just going to go over it again. We do have a time of birth. California California births we usually have a time for. It does vary. Where people are born and what's on the birth certificate and so forth. So Gavin Newsom has Moon in Capricorn. Moon in Capricorn. I've just been saying that Moon in Capricorn can be quite self-interested. Puts self first. So whatever he's doing, Moon in Capricorn, he is thinking about himself and his own material interests. He's a very rich man, very rich and well-connected man, and so we just do have to realize that. I know that all politicians are in it for themselves, but with Moon in Capricorn, I think more so. Perhaps we don't always see that Moon in Capricorn because he's a Libra. Libran politician. We just had a Libran politician. We just had David Cameron, who was born in October 1966, just been appointed foreign minister, foreign secretary in the UK. Now we've got Gavin Newsom to talk about. Gavin Newsom is a year younger than David Cameron. Librans, in one sense, can do well in politics because they're good at socializing. They know who to mix with. They know who matters. They can be very smooth. That's true. But at some point they do need to make a decision. And I suppose what with Gavin Newsom, with that sun in Libra, I suppose he's tried to make everyone happy. I suppose you've got all these competing interests in California, and he's done what he feels he needs to do to appease the crowd. But sometimes the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think that is a really important point with Librans. Librans can think they're doing the right thing, try to please everyone, and in the end please no one, and cause total chaos. But with that Moon in Capricorn, he's probably with the Sun in Libra, Moon square the Sun in Libra. He's probably very aware of the way the whole political mechanism works, and what he needs to do to be friends with the right people. And so that's always going to be an important calculation for him. And here is someone who's got Mars rising. Pluto rising. Power is very important to him. Power matters with Moon in Capricorn. Trine that Pluto rising. But Mars is a problem in that chart. When you see Mars on the IC like that, it almost says go away. When you interpret someone's chart and you see Mars on the IC, sometimes when you actually try to discuss with them the Mars on the IC, their Mars on the IC, you sometimes get a negative response. So that Mars on the IC, for example, doesn't like people prying in his, he's got his private sphere, his family, and whatever's going on in his family and his private business. He would resent that. And it's square Pluto. That is very protective. Also, it can be it can be angry as well as being defensive. Now, this Mars on the IC, the fact that he is a politician, he was born in San Francisco. He was mayor of San Francisco, and he's got Mars on the IC. Now that has implications, because if you take the technique of astrocartography, astrocartography would show all the places in the world where Mars was on the IC. Now, in this case, Mars on the IC represents a line. Now, let me just show you what I mean. I think that is a map of California. And you can see this is all the places at the precise time when Gavin Newsom was born, where Mars was on the IC. And so, by definition, we can see San Francisco is right there. So when he was born, Pluto was on at that precise moment when he was born. Pluto was rising in San Francisco, and Mars was on the IC, very close to San Francisco. And you can see he also has Uranus rising, and Uranus was conjunct the ascendant in eastern California. So he's completely drawn to California, and he's governor of California. And I think the problem is that Mars on the IC maybe because he's governor of, when he was mayor of San Francisco, in a sense his chart says something about San Francisco. When he's governor of California, his chart says something about California. And one thing that Gavin Newsom is accused of, rightly or wrongly, is destroying San Francisco. San Francisco is, I've never been to California and I've never been to San Francisco, but apparently San Francisco is a disaster area. I was talking to someone who recently had been to San Francisco. It is apparently really bad. It's falling apart. The commercial areas, it's apparently it's ruining. YouTube is full of videos about San Francisco, and it's the fact it's just moved to sort of rack and ruin, with its drugs and homelessness and everything else. You know the story, and so this may be his doing. Even if it's not his doing, there is the blame. It's happened under his watch as president, as mayor of California, and now as mayor of San Francisco, and now as governor of California. And so we need to bear that in mind when thinking about him as a future president. Is this going to have an impact on his ability to is this going to have an impact on his chances of becoming president anytime soon? Because that's really what I want to talk about in this video. His chances of becoming president. So a good starting point for that would be the astrology when the presidential elections actually happen. So these are the positions of the planets on November the 5th, 2024. I've gone for 11 p.m. Washington time. Those are the sort of times that the results are starting to come in. So what's it going to be like for him on November the 5th? 2024, in just under a year's time. So these are his transits. So inside, in a wheel, we've got his chart, his horoscope. Outer wheel, we've got the positions of the planets on the day of the election. Now, one thing really stands out, and this is what I meant by perhaps a beginner in astrology would predict that he's going to win, because Jupiter on the day of the election is at 20 degrees 4 minutes Gemini, at least at 11 p.m. in Washington D.C. In other words, Jupiter is exactly on his midheaven. Exactly on his midheaven. Now, from a symbolism point of view, that is becoming president, winning an election. That's brilliant. Getting a job, Jupiter, planet of good fortune, on the midheaven. Do you need to look at anything else? And I do think that if he's becomes a candidate, if he becomes a candidate, people are going to be talking about that. I think people are going to be fixated by the fact that Jupiter on the midheaven is going to give him the presidency. But Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter is in its detriment in Gemini. Jupiter's not well placed here. Okay, it's in mutual reception with Mercury. Okay, Jupiter is in Gemini in its detriment, but it is in mutual reception with Mercury, which is in Sagittarius. So that kind of looks not so bad. But certainly it seems to be an important day for him. Now, in my experience, Jupiter on the midheaven can be about making something, something really good happening. It can be. It can be about getting a job. It can also be about losing a job. Just as well, just as easily, Jupiter on the midheaven is about losing a job. Getting a job, losing a job. Because Jupiter just hits the midheaven, things change. For better or for worse. So that could be one thing going on at the time of the election. So, if he really were to be standing for the presidency, Jupiter on the midheaven could signify failure just as well as success. I suppose if he stands for the presidency, that would mean he'd have to give up the governorship of California. And so if he doesn't, is that right? Maybe he doesn't. No, I don't know. I don't know how it works. No, I don't think he does have to give up the governorship of California to be a candidate. I don't know. But Jupiter, so Jupiter on the midheaven can be about failure as well as success. But I do accept that on the face of it, this is a very powerful signature for him being successful in a presidential election in a year's time. Okay, that's the first point. Should look at his solar return. His solar return, not for this year, but for next year. This is his solar return. Sorry, that's it wrong. This is his solar return for October the 9th, 2024. This solar return is mixed. It's nice that he has North Node on the midheaven at the solar return. I think when I looked at David Cameron's chart in his solar return just before he was appointed Foreign Secretary, the North Node was on his midheaven. But there are a few problems with this chart. Mars is quite close to the ascendant. Mars was in Cancer. But at the time, Mars will be in Cancer at the time of the solar return in a year's time, and it will be square the Sun. So with a solar return, you do have to look at the Sun. I mean, that's important. That's important because it's a solar return, and so the Sun is making a square to Mars, and Mars is ruler. Okay, Mars is ruler of the 10th. So ruler of the 10th close to the ascendant is, you could say that's another signature. That's another signature of success. But Mars is fallen in Mars is fallen in Cancer because Mars is in its exaltation in Capricorn. So that's that may not be so great, and the Sun is making a square to Mars from the angles, and the Sun is conjunct the South Node. I mean, the solar return suggests something is quite important is going on for him. And I could one actually read that Sun square Mars as him becoming president, even though it's a difficult aspect. And I think that is a possibility. We do have to consider it. So you can see what I'm doing here. I mean, I'm looking at these signatures, and I'm trying to balance it. I'm trying to be in a situation where I can tell you whether or not he's going to be elected president. So this is what I'm trying to do. And the solar return doesn't entirely entirely say no. By the way, his odds of becoming president, I believe, have gone up a lot. They're better than 10%, as far as the betting sites are concerned. So we're not talking about some weird thing, Gavin Newsom becoming president. Yeah, he has a real chance, according to the betting sites, of becoming president. So that's his solar return. We have to be careful about interpreting that solar return. Mars doesn't look good in Cancer, although we should. With Mars in Cancer is a strange one, because although it is fallen in Cancer, Mars rules the water signs, so it's not peregrine. It has some dignity in the sign Cancer. So at this stage, I want to look at his Vedic chart. I've looked at his Vedic chart before. So here's the Vedic chart. Vedic chart, in many respects, is really good. I mean, we looked at David Cameron a few days ago, and how David Cameron has a really fortunate chart. Gavin Newsom also is kind of born lucky. Gavin Newsom's Vedic chart, he has got Jupiter-Venus conjunction on the ascendant. That's great. It's lucky, and Jupiter is ruler of the ninth. So ninth is the house of past life credit. It's the fifth house. So the fifth is it's a house of past life credit. And so Jupiter on the ninth, Jupiter, ruler of the fifth, in the first house is, extra fortunate. So that's perhaps a sure a sign that we're dealing with someone who is lucky. Now, in terms of periods of life, in February 2014, his Jupiter period started, and so this should have been a really very fortunate time for him, and indeed it was. With him, he was already Lieutenant Governor of San Francisco, and I think in January 2019 he became governor. So as far as the sub-periods are concerned, if we drill down, we can see that in December 2021 he entered his Jupiter major period and his Venus sub-period. So that completely echoes his Jupiter Venus in his first house. So this period, lasting from December 21 to August 2024, is extremely fortunate for him. If the presidential election were to have happened, say in beginning of August 2024, I think one would have to say he's going to make it. But the thing is that the presidential election happens after this fortunate period is over. By the time the presidential election comes around, he's actually in his Jupiter sun period. He's switched to the sun period of life. And look at his sun. His sun is not quite so fortunate. His sun in his Vedic chart is in the second house, and it's opposition Saturn Saturn in the eighth house. So I think that, you know, if he were to be riding high in sort of the presidential elections, you know, if he really did replace Biden over the next few months, for some reason, I'm not quite sure how that would work, because again, we still have the Kamala Harris problem. But if he were to be the main candidate, I think things might work really well for him until about August of next year. Then there might be a falling off. And the sun is not just opposition Saturn, but according to Shad Bala, you know, in Vedic astrology, Shad Bala represents 6 ways of evaluating a planet's strength. Bala is, I think, Sanskrit for strength, and Shad has relationships to the number 6. So according to Shad Bala, his sun is his weakest planet. And so he moves from a strong position in his Vedic chart to a much weaker position. I mean, he's still got Jupiter as his Mahadasha ruler, as his main ruler, but the sub-ruler of the sun is weakened. So there is a problem there. We should also not forget that transiting Saturn in his Vedic chart is going to be is in his 7th house. So the strength of Jupiter is kind of weakened by the fact that Saturn is in the opposite sign to Jupiter through the period of the election. So Vedic chart looks really good overall, particularly now, but there is a possibility that he loses some of his luck in August. So if he's riding high up until August, there could be a dramatic fall. And this assumes that he gets anywhere near the presidency. I mean, maybe that Biden will want to just carry on. Okay, so I want to go back to Western astrology, and I want to finish up with a more subjective approach to astrology. And I want to look at a horary I asked I asked a horary question. I asked this question in July the 24th, 2023. So let me tell you about the question I asked. This question, the precise wording is important. I asked the question, will Gavin Newsom be US President by February the 1st, 2025? Now, that covers lots of different scenarios. But the main scenario, perhaps it's covering, is him, for one reason or another, getting elected in November and becoming in November 2024 and becoming president in January 2025, which of course January is when you get the administration's changeover. So I asked this question, and for my time where I was living, I'm living in Washington State, so I asked this question and I set this chart up on the basis of the time I asked the question. So this is the birth chart of the question I asked. Is Gavin Newsom going to be president by February 2025? So when you're dealing with this kind of chart, the first thing to ask is, where is Gavin Newsom in this chart? Now, you could say that because he's governor of California, in a sort of senior executive position, that he could be ruler of the 10th. In horary astrology of the 17th century horary astrology, that the English astrologer William Lilly wrote about in his book Christian Astrology. If you're asking questions about the king, for example, you look at the 10th house. On the other hand, if you're asking questions about someone you have no connection with, you're asking about the 7th house. So do I take the 10th house or do I take the 7th house? I feel that I should take the 7th house. Not least because, you know, we've got, if we take the 7th house, then Gavin Newsom is the moon, and he's moon in Libra. And there we can see moon in Libra conjunct the south node. Now that does kind of chime with his birth chart, because if you're going back to Gavin Newsom's natal chart, he has got Sun in Libra conjunct the south node. Okay, widely conjunct, but he's got the Sun and the South Node in the same sign, and so the horary we've got has got the Moon conjunct the South Node, and so I think it's reasonable to take the Moon as Gavin Newsom. Now, I understand some people watching this who do horary astrology may disagree, and they may say I should be taking Mars, and I completely understand that. But I'm taking the Moon as Gavin Newsom. So, what is the state of the Moon? The positional state of the Moon in this chart is not very good. Firstly, it is in the Viercombustor, moving from 15. The Viercombustor is from the part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. I mean, there is a view that if you've got the Moon in the Viercombustor in a horary chart, you shouldn't even ask the question. It's almost like saying there's something wrong with the chart. I don't think I'd go that far, but. The moon in the Viercombustor suggests that things can happen that we weren't expecting. I don't know, like Biden suddenly resigning or whatever. I mean, just things happening. The moon is conjunct Spica, which is a fortunate fixed star. So that might be good. But if you look at it from the point of view of sects, SECTS, Moon is really rather unfortunate, because the Moon is a nighttime chart, is a nighttime planet, it's nocturnal, and this is a daytime chart. It was asked in the early evening, but in the summer, so the sun is still very much above the horizon. So the Moon doesn't function very well during the day, and if you do have a daytime chart, the Moon likes to be below the horizon, and it's not below the horizon, it's above the horizon. Further, the Moon is a feminine planet, and it's in Libra, which is a masculine sign. So the Moon is really out of place. So that is a problem with the Moon. On the plus side, I should say the Moon is peregrine. It has the Moon has no dignities in where it is in Libra. Oh, by the way, this word peregrine, I've used it several times. So you've heard about a peregrine falcon. A peregrine means a wanderer, and what this means in astrology, if a planet is peregrine, is that it has no dignity. It's not in its sign. It's not in its exaltation. It's not in its triplicity. There are some minor dignities, terms and faces. I won't go into detail about that, which you also consider when deciding whether a planet is peregrine. And so, the Moon has no dignity in this chart. But it is making a sextile to Mercury, and it is making a sextile to Venus, which is conjunct Regulus. That's nice. Moon is making a sextile. That's good. Things going on. I mean, I think that suggests that things will be going on for Gavin Newsom. They're nice things to be happening. But presidency. This is a big question. Is the moon strong enough to give him the presidency, to make him president by February 2025? Particularly as the moon's last aspect before it leaves the sign, or what it's moving to, is a conjunction with the South Node. And the South Node is, I would have said, about bad reputation. It may be that the California thing will sink him. I don't know, something like that. But so looking at this horary chart overall, I would have said no. A lot of excitement about Gavin Newsom, but he will not be president at any time between now, President of the United States, at any time between now and February 2025. And for me, this horary chart, it is more important than the fact that he's got Jupiter on his midheaven on the day of a presidential election. So, yeah, whatever happens, don't worry. Gavin Newsom is not going to be president between now and February 2025. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say on the matter of Gavin Newsom. Yeah, things he could. I mean, I'm not. He may be a nominee. He may be. He may do great things over the next year, but no, he's not going to. He's not going to be president anytime soon. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about Gavin Newsom, and really, we shouldn't really worry about him much more. So if we do see him getting a lot of publicity, it's if Biden falls by the wayside, if he somehow manages to skirt around Kamala Harris and be the nominee, still it's not. He's not going to make it, which raises the question: who is going to make it? Anyway, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again on Monday.